Giffin Podcast. Your virtual lab for inside-out transformation into the man God intended you to be. Here, we use modern psychological concepts and spiritual tools to help you align your mind and machine to dominate your God-given mission. So put your purses down and your excuses away. Here's your coach, Jake Giffin.
The Jake Giffin Pod. Well, welcome you guys. This has been a phenomenal week, just so you know. I don't spend any time on Facebook whatsoever, but as it turns out, if you're going to start a group to support men, specifically to support Christian men, Facebook groups are the best place to do it. And I have some things that I'm going to roll out here over the next several months. And so I started a Facebook group for Christian men. It's called Made Man. Now, if you go onto Facebook and you search for Made Man, you'll see it. It's a black banner. It says Made Man. It's got cool M's, the cool M logo. As we do in any kind of business, there's got to be a logo. There's got to be an image that articulates that gives it a special feel, a special brand. Interesting enough, the logo, or the logos, is exactly what this group is made to build in. So as you know, we're on this kick. We have been on this kick, and we're on this thing for the last several months. And that is, how do we help men embrace masculinity? How do we help Christian men? And look at this. Look at the landscape of Christian masculinity in the world today. Would you articulate that reflection as people that are weak or strong? Are they powerful, or are they somewhat emaciated and sad? And if you're anything like me, what you see, with the exception of a lot of the men that I fellowship with, that I have brotherhood with, is a landscape in general Christianity, pathetic, weak men. I don't know what to tell you. I know some of you guys are going to take that into mass, like, oh my gosh, I'm so hurt by that. I can't believe you're being rude. But really, just think of it objectively. You're still battling with the same things you've been battling with years. You're not powerful. I mean, look, this is what Jesus said. He said that you go away, and when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, you will receive power, and there's no power there. Paul mentions to Timothy that he hasn't given you a spirit of timidity to fall back into fear, but he's given you a spirit of power and of a sound mind. And you certainly don't see a lot of that. What I see a lot of are men in the marketplace, Christian men in the marketplace they don't know who they are. They don't know. They'll talk to you about certain Christian things, but you know that they're just trying to say it because they think you need to hear it or want to hear it from them. I know what that's like, because I did that. I feel like I did that for a long time. Now I've been walking with the Lord since 1994. However, there has been some long periods of my life where I was that guy, where I was that weak man. There was so much going on, and I kind of attribute it back to when I got saved in 94. And the very first thing they do at church, in a lot of churches, is they say, okay, boom, bro, look, you're spiritually alive. We call that Christian. Come over here. We're going to teach you what Christians do. Right? So what do Christians do? Well, Christians read the Bible. Christians pray. Christians fellowship with other Christians. That's going to church, and they worship together. Great. Christians serve. Yep, no problem. That's all humanity, by the way. It's written in the code, in the spirit code. That's people who serve. There's reward in it. Anyway, that's because everybody's made in the image of God, but not everybody's spiritually alive. That's a different subject for a different time. But this is the point. You serve, and you share your faith, and you reproduce. because that's what we do. Okay. So what I learned early on as a Christian man was that these are the behaviors that Christian men do. And so let me give you a perspective here that I think might help some of you men who are struggling, not understanding the path forward, not really understanding what this purpose of life is. Because quite frankly, a lot of us have grown up in churches, not grown up like from a baby, maybe from a child, but I was 20 something when I got born again, when I was born twice the second time. When my spirit became alive, that's 1994. And since then, I have served with some really good guys, and I have served with some pretty pathetic guys. Guys who, men who would show up every Sunday and talk about what torturous, emaciated, pitifully weak, sinful men that we were. And there's utility, I suppose, in that. I just did it myself when I said, hey, there's a lot of Christians out there that are kind of weak. But that's not to say that that's who you are. And so I served with a lot of guys who would say, well, this is who you are. You're just a wretched sinner. You'll never be anything more. And that's it, man. Pray more, read more, serve more, worship more. Do that more. Do whatever more. Do it more. And so that's the environment we grow up in. And if you're at a church right now where you're only being told that you're nothing but a wretched sinner and you'll never be anything more, they're going to be so surprised when you cheat on your wife or your taxes. They're going to freak out. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe Jim cheated on his wife. You're like, why would you be surprised? That's all you're telling him he's going to do anyway. He's got no choice in the matter, really. You tell him he's nothing but a wretched sinner and he's never going to be anything else. And he keeps trying and trying and trying and trying to be a good Christian. And so it's no wonder he got tired and worn out. The burden was so heavy. It's no wonder that he did it. So here's what he discovered. That in that rearing, in that new believer kind of discipling, what we call discipleship, it could be called coaching or something now, I guess. In the discipleship, there was one thing that was missing, that people passed by every single week. And that is 2 Corinthians 5, where he talks about, you are a new creation. All old things have passed away. Behold, behold, all things have become new. Now, what does that mean? Well, here's what I've been meditating on now for the last several years, and that is this idea of Genesis 1 and 2. Now, I started a company last year called D6. D6 is a consulting company and a coaching company. We consult it's a brand new company. We will be consulting mostly with business people, and we'll do mostly coaching for Christian men, Christian businessmen specifically, but men are the demo there. And then later on this year and early next year, we'll be rolling out a bunch of digital products at D6 to help support spiritual growth and dominance in the marketplace and in your missions. And so that's going to include your physical health, your nutritional health. That's going to include your spiritual health, who you are, and then business support, goals, all that kind of stuff, all that kind of self-help stuff, but from a Christ-centered perspective. So that's D6. Now, where do you get the name D6? Well, D6 happens to be the day that God made animals. So on day 6, God takes the ground and he makes animals of all kinds, of all different kinds, after their own kind, right? So they're formed out of the ground. Now, as a side note, what do animals that were made out of the ground eat? They eat the food that was grown in the ground, right? You see on that, at the very beginning, the ecosystem was meant to be self-supporting. So the relationship between animal and food is is essential. If you draw the gap here, you have the animal that eats the food from the same thing the animal was made from. That's true nutrition. I'm not just saying you got to be vegetarian. That's not my point. My point is that when you look at it from the very first instance, it is true nutrition is eating whatever it is that your body is made from to give it the right nutrients so that you can survive. So that's not Cheetos, by the way, okay? That's the side point. So on day 6, he makes animals, all kinds of animals. And also on day 6, on the same day he makes animals, he makes man. He makes man from the same stuff he made animals from. He made them from the ground. He made them to look like other animals, right? We all see, hear, taste, feel, touch. We all have the same senses in some kind of combination of variety. Obviously, some animals focus differently. Horses have to tilt their head up and down to focus at length, at distance or whatever. But we all have different ways of perceiving the habitat around us. But they're all basically sight, sound, touch, taste. You get the idea. Man's body was not made much different than the animals. That's key. That's just key in understanding what your body is later. What was special about man on day 6 was that God made him, man, in his image. Now that's got profound implications that we've talked about, a number of times on this podcast. That's got profound implications. First of all, at the beginning of time, all you have is God, and then whatever angels and spiritual beings he created, right? So there's God at the top, but there's nothing made. So then he makes the habitat, which is our planet. He makes the habitat. He plants the food, he does the water, he separates the space from the space. He essentially spends the better part of a week creating a habitat. Day 6, he makes animals and cattle. It's going to help fertilize the ground and do different things that cattle do. And then he makes man and puts man as the head over creation. He creates this gift of a habitat, and then he puts man in charge of it. And in doing so, because he makes man in his image, that's with rationality, creativity, reason, logic. Not all kind. You get this image of God in a small package. Not the totality of God's image, of course, but the potential of, I suppose. What it really means in Genesis 1 and 2 is, what it really means is that God creates the habitat and puts man in charge of it so that we would manage the resources therein in the same way that he would. And that we would grow it and multiply it. He says about the animals, because we're made in his image, he says about the animals that we would dominate them. He says about the land that we would subdue it. Now, these are missions, right? This is a calling. This is what God has called us to. Dominance. 2 words that mean dominance. One is about animal world and one is about the land. What it both means is that we manage those resources the way that God would manage those resources. So I get a lot of kickback from time to time from people who go, well, what are you, like a Greenpeace guy? What are you, like a tree hugger type? What are you, like an environmentalist? No, I'm none of that. I'm none of that. Burn coal. Coal's there to use. Use it responsibly. God obviously gave us coal, but you want to use it responsibly. You want to use it like God would use it. You want to take care of the ground like God would take care of the ground. So anyway, I can go off on a whole regenerative farming situation. I'm not going to. The point of the matter is that the piece that was missing in the discipleship was that you were made in the image of God to reflect the image of God in time and space. And he gave you a body to do that. You're made in the image of God. You are a spiritual man, and you've been given a body suitable for this habitat. You are not animal. You are like God. Okay, well, what does that mean? Struggling Christian men are taught, either passively or on purpose, that they're nothing but wretched sinners, and they're nothing but really, and what does that equate to? They're nothing but animals with animal nature, animal tendencies, like Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 2. Previous to coming to Christ, you were but rabid animals, going about by the lust of your flesh. I forget the exact passage. You guys can read it on your own. You're literate. And that counts. So, read it. Too many men are stuck in this idea that you're just an animal, trying to be like God. But man, that sin that dwells the flesh really has a grip on the animal, really has a grip on the flesh. And I don't know, man, I can't break free from my animal to be like God. And that was the discipleship that I got. You're basically animal, and you are doing godly behaviors. You are basically animal, and you're trying to be that. Right? You're here, trapped in sin, nothing but a sinner, and you are attempting to develop closeness with God. Now, here's the other way to think about it. And here I think is the right way to think about it. If my pastor listens to this podcast, he will correct me. Or you guys can correct me. For goodness sakes, man, subscribe to the podcast and leave some comments. What are you waiting for? So here's how I see it. I see it that I was animal, and in my flesh, there is an exploit of sin. Sin is in my flesh. Sin takes that which is natural and perverts it, gives me a lust for it. I have to earn resources. Let's say money. Sin in the flesh wants me to be greedy and jealous and envious and covetousness and covet. It wants me to kill. It wants me to steal. It wants me to murder. It wants me to do all these things in order to get that. That's what sin does. Right? It's natural for the animal to reproduce and have sex. Sin in the flesh, however, says sex with just your wife. What about with her? And what about with them? And what about with myself? And what about with everything else? Sin takes that which is natural and perverts it, and then elevates it and elevates it and elevates it, and addicts you and addicts you and addicts you until you're utterly pathetic, weak man, because you're trapped in this animal box trying to be like God, but you're just never, ever good enough. And that is not Scripture. Scripture is that once you give your life to Christ, you believe what Jesus did on that cross in removing all those sins and all the ways that you have disobeyed God and all the ways that you have acted like a stupid animal, given yourself over to stupid animal behaviors and lusted after flesh and stolen and coveted and blasphemed. All that time, thousands and thousands and thousands of times that you've done that, Jesus removed when he died on the cross. His death, his burial, his resurrection qualifies me now. Not only cleanses me from all unrighteousness, from all sins, but presents me, as he has taken my punishment, a just due, a just recompense that I owed God. He took it, removed it all, and then presented me to God, holy, righteous, just. That's crazy. Why would he do that? Because God so loved the world. He made us in his image. We fell out of that image and began to behave like animals. And then he earned that image back for us because we couldn't do it ourselves. Then he situates me. My position in God is that I have bold access to his throne room. I have relationship with God now. I'm seated at the right hand with Christ in the heavenly places. I am a co-heir with Christ. The world trembles at the coming of the sons of men, or the sons of God, sorry. Romans chapter 8. I'm not animal trying to be like God. God has given me this as a gift. I am spiritually alive in 2 Corinthians 5. I am something new. I am, at least in part, the man I was meant to be, positionally. Spiritually alive, I am spirit. I have a body. And it's not the animal trying to do godly things. It is a godly man bringing along the animal. It is now me, the spirit man, the spirit man. That sounds so woo-woo. I can't even hardly stand it, but it's me. Like, who I am is the spirit behind the eyes, the animating force in this body. I've been given a body, that which I call a machine. And I operate this in this habitat in the way that God has created me to do so, to dominate my missions. That means my business. That means managing my family. That means managing my relationships and my partnerships and my fellowships and my everything in my life is a mission that God has given me to nurture and to nurture and to take care of and to steward in a way that He would. When He says, do all things, whatever you do, do all things as unto Christ. That is to do all things as He would do them to honor Him. So why would you do that? Because He earned this new life for you. I am spiritually alive now, and I'm bringing the animal along. And here's the key that I think puts a linchpin in this whole situation, and that is this. When Paul says in Romans 7:8, and other places, by the way, I don't have the references. I do this right after I work out. I don't bring references. Look them up. You're spiritual men. You know how to use the Bible, right? Grab yourself a Bible, look it up, find a search term. For goodness sakes, you have a smartphone right there in your hand you're listening to this podcast on. Search it. Consider yourself dead to sin. As long as you're behaving like an animal, trying to do godly things, then sin is associated in the body and you are almost forced to obey its desires. You are a slave to what it wants. And your body is now the driving force instead of you. Your body has a desire. Sin elevates that desire to a point where it's almost unbearable not to do it. And you do it, and then you go, woe is me, woe is me. Not anymore. Today you stand in the victory that is earned for you by Christ. As a new creation, you are the spirit behind the eyes. You operate the body. So now you have new choices in this position. In this position, you have new choices, and the choice is, I get to tell the body what it gets. Why do you think I call my body a machine? Because it helps me disassociate its desires from what it really needs. So if I let my flesh go running rampant and getting anything it wants, the sin in the flesh will elevate and pervert until I'm the shell of a man I'm supposed to be. And instead of me managing and dominating my missions as a godly man, I am wallowing around in the mud like a pig, wondering what life is all about. God has abandoned me. God seems like He hates me. God this, God that. And then once you get that far gone, where you start blaming God for your woes when it's yourself who's living in the sin, who hasn't controlled his own body, Spare me the drama, bro. You're going to blame God. That's when we start having issues, you and me. When you start casting dispersions upon the creator of the universe that earned back your image, earned back the image of God for you and made you spiritually alive and wiped out all those things that kept you from abiding by that image. You're going to now point your finger at him. You're going to put your bird to the sky, to him, like it's his fault. No, bro, you're the one that sits here in your flesh going, oh, I can't do it. I'm wrapped. If you are a slave to sin, then you certainly do not belong to God. You need to figure out what team you're on today. Because right now you stand in the power of God. And if you are a new creation, you are the spirit behind the eyes. You operate the body. You operate the body. The body does not operate you. And if you're finding yourself in a position where your body is operating you, then you need to decide to deprive the body, the flesh. And what that means is maybe you need to fast for a day or two. Go to the mountains, don't eat anything, drink water, read the Bible, only the Bible, hear the Bible, listen to the Bible. Spend time with God. Teach your body that it doesn't get what it wants, it gets what it needs. And I decide that. So then what's the power in that? The power is that now as somebody who is seated at the right hand with Christ, I dictate what the machine gets and what the machine doesn't. What does that mean? That means that my body and sin doesn't have power over the body. I consider, as Paul says, I consider myself dead to sin. And what power does something have over you if you're dead to it? Nothing. It can do nothing. It has no say. And yet we walk around. I get that, yeah, there are times when these old triggers pop up, boom. The cause and effect, the trigger and the response. I know how that works. It is a psychological program that you've trained your body to respond to certain stimulus in a moment. In a moment. See, what most of you don't get, and maybe you haven't thought about, is that when you first encountered a particular stimulus, between the trigger and your response, there was a gap. And in that gap, your mind was trying to figure out how to react to this response. Now, if you reacted to that trigger with, let's say, anger, an outburst of anger, you were rewarded, a dopamine hit, and then sin goes, oh, that's nice. So that worked. So you have the trigger, the gap, and then the response. The next time that trigger fires, the gap is there, but then sin reminds you, remember last time we handled it this way? We raised our voice, we yelled. Do it again. It didn't work this time. Do it louder. So do it louder. And the more times you react to that stimulus the same way, that gap gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Some of us, unless I preempt it in the throne room, in the war room, and in the weight room, which are going to be illustrated in our D6 Made Man book coming up, our program coming up, unless I preempt it and I project ahead of time how I want to handle that stimulus, then when it happens, I'm going to react the same way. But I can preempt it. How do I want to handle this? How do I want to behave next time this happens? Put myself in that situation. Think through it. Really see myself. Here's the trigger. It happens so fast. So what am I going to do? Now, next time this trigger comes, I'm just going to go. My first response is going to take a big breath. I'm going to take a big breath. Next time this stimulus happens, I'm going to take a big breath. And then I'm going to try to build in a gap. I'm going to try to expand that gap between the stimulus and the result, between the trigger and the response. And this is going to give me time to direct to reprogram a new response, not one of anger, not one of frustration, not one of lust, not one of greed, not one of covetous, not one of idolatry, not one of anything that's sinful. I'm going to direct this now to the Spirit and go, how would God do this? How can I honor God in this decision? Trigger, new response, reward. Peace, patience, kindness. That kind of stuff is what is taught throughout Scripture. We're going to chunk it down into nice bite-sized things in our Made Man group on Facebook, which you should be a part of by the end of this podcast. And follow D6. I don't do that much on social with D6 right now, but you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all those places. And you'll be up to date on the most common, on the newest developments of D6. But we're going to be providing a lot of those resources to help you gain control of your mind and your body so that you can live a godly life. The point of this sporadic conversation is that if you are the man that was reared in an organization or in a way that did not put the image of God first and your identity as the image of God first, then this is the key element you're missing in your walk. I have a deep-seated belief that any new believer study material the first chapter should be who you are now. Because trying to change behaviors, trying to change beliefs is all super easy when you understand your identity as the image of God. As the image of God commanding the body as it is a machine to dominate your missions in peace and in power. That is the D6 way. That is the made man way. That is going to be the foundation of what we build out here for the next several years to support the growth and the strength of Christian masculinity in the marketplace so that we can dominate not only our individual missions, but as a group, dominate our missions in spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ to get more men empowered and embodying the image of God. And I thank Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, who was buried and rose for my justification, who now sits at the right hand of the Father and has seated me with him. And if you believe in Christ, he seated you with him. Embody and embrace that image. And until next time.
If you enjoyed this show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. For more information about Jake, log on to jakegiffin.com and find him on all social media platforms. Until next time, peace and power be yours.